All right. How y'all doing today? My name is 12 Gauge. Welcome to my channel. If you haven't been here before, welcome. I hope you find something that keeps you interested and it keeps you coming back. Tonight we have a special guest in the house and we have a special show planned for you. So let me tell you a little bit. Excuse me. Um, what we speak in here is analytical. We use analytical thinking. We use research and we use our own experiences based on our professional licensures and professional employment that we have to be able to discuss some of the cases that we have here and some of the life experiences that we have here. A lot of times it's difficult to just express where we have found the information or where we have located the information, but do believe that on this channel we do not speculate that often. If we do speculate, it's for opinion only. One thing that I would ask you that if you are in the chat, that you keep it classy. Please, no arguments. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. We agree to disagree, and we try to keep it classy in there and try to understand that we're all here for the same goal and the same purpose. I do have an individual here. Her name is Karla, and I'm going to bring her up on panel, and she's going to tell you guys a little bit about herself, and then I'll let you know what the show is about while we wait on other people to get here. So, without further ado, here we go. All right, Karla, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good this afternoon.
Awesome. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, since many
Sure.
don't know who you are, what you are about, and
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I have I'm a double major, so I have a master's in criminal justice and I have a master's in social work. So I've worked at I worked at one prison in TDCJ up in Amarillo, which is the maximum security prison. So I worked there for about 5 years or so. Uh, when I got my master's in criminal justice, I had to leave that employment because I started pursuing my master's in social work and started working with early childhood intervention, which is ECI. And I've been working. I always tell my clients, I feel like my my studies have never ended because I continue to work it. I haven't stopped working in ECI until I got the tragic news that I had breast cancer. I don't know how else to put it. I have breast cancer. Was diagnosed with breast cancer in October of last year. And so I've just been battling breast cancer and I'm doing great. I ended chemo. Chemo ended on February 28th. And then now I had a double mastectomy April 5th and have now I am moving into radiation. I'll have some radiation for about 6 weeks starting on June 17th. And after that, 6 months of wait until I can actually receive my reconstruction surgery. And that is who I am. I mean, that's my battle right now, but I'm winning it, and I am happy, happy to report that to you guys. So that's
oh,
just a little bit about me.
okay. Well, we're glad to have you on the panel tonight. For those of you that don't remember, we were discussing probably at the early part of last week about narcissism. We were talking about sociopaths and psychopaths, and I wanted to kind of deep dive into a case tonight. And I will tell you a little more about it as we go along with this. And but first, I want to show the video of psychopaths versus sociopaths versus narcissism, and I can give Karla a little bit of the floor to be able to just decipher the differences, and I can jump in there um, whenever it's needed. to ask questions and that sort. So I think the topic is a very good one to discuss because, many times individuals do not know the differences between um, what path versus psychopaths. So let's go ahead and let me grab the video and we'll be able to watch the differences. Carla, while I'm getting this, could you tell them just a
Mhm.
little bit about what narcissism is? Why I grabbed this video?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
when we're talking about narcissism, right? It's actually a personality disorder. Okay, so I'm gonna read to you straight from the DSM-5. One of the reasons why I like this, I like what you do, Marty, is because we do try to cite our sources, so you guys have good information. So whenever you're out talking about it, you can definitely tell people this is where she got the information, right? Because this isn't anything that I'm making up or anything like that. So let's dive in. Like the narcissistic personality disorder is in the DSM-5. So for those that don't know or aren't as familiar with the DSM, that is what professionals use. That is what I use whenever I am gonna try to make a diagnosis, and it is a guide that tells us exactly, if we can diagnose, if they meet certain criterias, and what number of criterias they need to meet in order for us to say, hey, yes, this person does have this disorder. And there are tests that we have to do and conduct to properly diagnose. So tonight, there is no test we're giving anybody. We're just talking in general terms. So I'm just going to read the um, the description here, and then I'll check in with Marty and see if he's ready for us. All right, so narcissistic personality, the diagnostic criteria, it is 301.81. And in order for us to give a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, we know that a persuasive pattern of generosity, so that is a fantasy or behavior needed for admiration and lack of empathy beginning by early childhood and present in various contexts as indicated by five or more of the following. And the DSM, I'm not going to go through each one, but the DSM actually has 9 descriptors, and so the person has to at least meet five or more of these descriptors in order for us to diagnose somebody with narcissistic personality disorder. So I do want to say that narcissistic personality disorder is very hard for clinicians for us to identify because they do not come and get help because of their narcissistic ways. They feel like they know everything. They feel like they are smarter than anyone. So therefore, coming to get any type of help, is not as common as you may think that it is. So it is underrepresented when we're talking about statistics. So therefore, I can't tell you, like I could tell you in reference to breast cancer, 1 in 8 is, or what, I believe it's 1 in 4, sorry. It's like 1 in 4. So you get 4 women, one of them will have a diagnosis of breast cancer. I cannot say that statistic with narcissistic personality disorder because we just don't have that much because of, their um because of the way that they are, if that makes any sense. They're not going to come because they feel like they know everything. They feel like they're on top of it, on top of everything, and they feel like, what, I don't need to learn. So let me check in with Marty. Marty, it looks like you've got the video ready to go.
Yeah, so let me kind of recount what you said as far as
Yeah,
needing five criteria out of what'd you say, nine?
out of
Five out of
9.
nine? Okay,
Yeah.
so basically, Chad, that means that, when you're asking this client in front of you as you're doing a diagnostic test, you're asking them these certain questions, and if they give an answer that raises a point value, then you give that point to that question. So if you can get 5 out of those 9 of those points, then basically you give an impression of possibly having narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder. Isn't that what you were saying, Carla?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let's go ahead and watch this little short video. It has some cartoons and stuff. Before we begin, I want to give Wellness Lenses the credit for making this video. I'm just basically just commentating on it for entertainment purposes, disorder purposes. So let's just go ahead and get this Wellness Lenses video going, and you guys let us know what you think in the chat afterwards.
We've all been guilty of this, throwing labels like narcissist and psychopath around when someone is difficult to deal with. The most important thing to remember is that they are not all serial killers like you see in the movies. Secondly, all of those terms are distinct labels that qualify as psychological disorders. Welcome to our channel, where we talk about the journey to self-development. If you're new here, we trust you're going to love this video. And if you're a subscriber, thank you for coming back. Without further ado, here we go. Today we'll be talking about a very common confusion most people face when dealing with a difficult or selfish person. Is this person a narcissist or a sociopath? How do we even know the difference between all these labels when they have too many overlapping features? We'll talk about how to tell the difference between a psychopath, a sociopath, and a narcissist when you are around one. Knowing this distinction is really important, so you're better equipped to deal with them. Later in the video, I'm going to show you how best you can handle relationships with psychopaths and the rest of them. Because yes, navigating these kinds of relationships always requires peculiar methods. So I've observed that the biggest cause of the confusion is that too many similarities exist between these terms. If you want to prevent yourself from using them interchangeably, you'll have to learn their differences. Beginning with narcissism, you'll find that narcissistic people primarily struggle in their interpersonal relationships because they tend to have this insatiable need for excessive praise and recognition. This affects their connection with others because, with some, much focus on their own self-worth superiority. You know what happens when you fail at this? Isolation that while overt narcissists may be attention-seeking, covert narcissists tend to be shy while holding on to their arrogance. Overt narcissists also have a grandiose.
Okay, I want to stop right there because I never understood that there was a difference between a covert and an overt narcissist. I've always thought that there was just an overt narcissist. I didn't know that there was a covert, like someone behind the scenes covertly trying to manipulate and all these other things that narcissists do. That's something new to me. Did you know about that, Carla?
Yeah, I knew a little bit about it, and so I to my knowledge, right? Because that's all I can kind of speak to. It's going to be covert is kind of like that narcissist that it takes a while to for that narcissism to come out. So they're manipulating everything behind the scenes. So for I can give a personal example of this. So my ex I was married, and my ex is a covert narcissist. So she's not an outright, like if you were to meet her, you wouldn't put narcissism together with her at all because she manipulates everything behind the scenes. So she's just kind of in the background manipulating everything. So I'll kind of tell
Okay.
you, yeah, I
So
can definitely.
it's not in your face. You can see it. It's not something that's very demonstrative in front of you. It's behind the scenes. It's kind of like, I'm gonna play games with you behind the scene to make you feel like you're not in control, as they said just then. It's about the control factor.
Right. So I can give like a personal example of that. So for me and my experience, my ex in front of people would treat me very well. And what I mean by that is if we went out, let's say with to dinner, my glass wouldn't be empty. She would order for me. She'd make sure the order was right. She'd put her arm around me, and everyone around us thought that we were the perfect, couple. Like we were living the perfect life. And that, I mean, we were always dressed, matching, everything. But behind closed doors, this is where it gets, this is what we were talking about, right? That behind the scenes. So in closed doors, when no one is watching, we're not at dinner with anyone, that changed. It at that point, she wasn't the loving person that she displayed, in public. So therefore, whenever I decided to leave because of because of so many reasons, and because she was a narcissist, to be honest, you know, I knew as a clinician she's a narcissist. So the last thing that I did was I just left. The smearing campaign happened, she did that to me and everything, but no one if I were to go telling my friends, if I went running to you, Marty, and said, "Hey, Denise treats me behind closed doors. She's very cold. She doesn't hug me. She doesn't show affection." You would look at me and you honestly would tell me, "You're a liar. You are
Yeah.
lying." Because in front of you, when we went to have dinner with you, she displayed all of those things. So you would just assume this is also happening at home. And so that's kind of what the curved narcissist is. And it's kind of, in my opinion, one of the more dangerous ones, in my opinion, just because it is a lot of people don't believe the victim. They
Okay.
they really don't, because they work behind the scenes, they manipulate things, behind the scenes. And I mean, and I can tell another story if you would like me to, but that's up to you.
Well, let's get to that story later on. I want to ask the chat at this point. If you guys are understanding the differences that we're trying to portray here and how we're explaining the narcissism definition versus the myth that it often carries. If you can kind of give us any insight, if y'all have experienced any narcissistic people in your life, or if you've ever been covertly controlled by a narcissist or overtly controlled by a narcissist, because we're trying to basically give information so that people really understand the differences rather than having that word just be the trending word of the moment. Since a lot of times it is thrown around a lot. Is that also gaslighting? Do you want to answer that, Carla? What's the difference between narcissism and gaslighting?
Like, let's see here. With I can explain it with just with examples. So, for example, I can sit here and tell you everything, but when you experience it in person, right? Like, what does that actually look like in day to day? So, gaslighting would be if I was talking to Marty and I was in an argument with Marty. Let's say that I hadn't spoken to Marty in a while. So I come to Marty and I say, "Hey Marty, we haven't spoken in a while." And Marty replies back to me and says, "Well, Carla, You don't know what I've been through. Okay, well, wait a minute. That's gaslighting me, right? That's a form of gaslighting because I don't know what you've been through. You're right about that, but you haven't told me about that. And now you're upset with me over something that I have no control over or I didn't know. And what that does is kind of sends up a smoke screen. So they're sending up kind of a smoke screen so their accountability isn't there, right? So that's what gaslighting is so when somebody is trying to hold you accountable for things that you you don't have any control over or that you didn't even know about, and it totally defeats the argument because then the recipient of that is trying to think back like to, well, let me see, did has Marty told me what he's going through? Maybe I know what is it? What was it? And that then they just go in and pound you even more. And so that's kind of what gaslighting is like. Well, that's kind of what it looks like in real in real time um in our
Okay.
lives. That's kind of like one example of gaslighting. They also do a lot of
Very well explained indeed. Yes, very well. I hope that makes a little more sense, Rondi, because like she said, gaslighting is something that the person who's being controlled by the narcissist, it's a way for them to control them with playing mind games. It's kind of like assuming, like, let's say that you didn't even know, like she said, let's say that you didn't even know that this person was going through some stuff and they use that as their advantage. Well, I'm going through some things, so your level of whatever you're dealing with is less important than mine. And that's the narcissistic trait that put themselves above other people and their needs. Would that be would that be true, Carla?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
connected. It's connected to the effect that the narcissist is the individual, the gaslighting, the trauma, the manipulation, the lying, the control, all that is the emotional imprisonment that the individual tries to keep the other person under because they want that control. They have this intense personality disorder that makes them feel above everyone. So
right.
in that aspect, they're going to try to maintain that control however they can contain it. Like if you get into an argument with one of these people, they're going to try to destroy you if they feel slighted in any of the bit of the word. If you slighted me, I'm going to destroy you and show you that you're out of line for talking to me the way you're talking to me. How dare you hold me accountable?
Yeah,
Does that make
exactly.
sense?
Yeah.
Let's
And
watch a
they're
little
gonna
more of the video. Go ahead, Kay. Carla.
Oh, I was just gonna say, one of the things that that narcissistic people do, and speaking from just my own experience, I'll just give this quick little scenario. So let's say I'm getting dressed for dinner, and let's say Marty and I are in a relationship, and Marty is the narcissist, and I put on a dress. And I go to Marty and I say, look at my dress. Do you like my dress? Now listen, now I'm talking to a narcissist, right? So it's hard for them to look at me with a pretty dress on because they're more concerned about themselves, and so Marty may say to me, well, that dress just really does not match what I'm wearing. So that's the narcissistic trait. Now, covert narcissism is going to take it a step further. So covert is going to say, well, that doesn't match, but it looks good. I guess it looks all right. It looks enough. And we go to dinner. Marty, as the covert narcissist, will then look at a couple and will say, oh, wow, you guys look awesome. You guys match in everything. He may say, give them a compliment, right? He's going to give them a compliment. I know because behind closed doors, I was already criticized for that dress. So when he gives a compliment to somebody for their dress and for the fact that they match, because him and I don't match, that is a jab at me right there in public, yet no one else around there is picking that up. The only person that picks up that jab psychologically, emotionally, is going to be me because it has already been told to me prior to. So that's that covert. That's when we say, they're manipulating behind the back, in the back, in the scenes. That's what we're talking about. So I just kind of wanted just to give, real life world, real life example. They be giving compliments to other people, but narcissist doesn't care what other people wear. They only care about what they look
Yeah.
like, right?
Yeah.
But they're gonna do that, and the only person that knows is me, or the victim.
And Rondi asked, thank you so much for that, Karla. And Rondi asked also in physical abuse. Well, I would be willing to state that the physical abuse comes after the fact. Once the narcissist feels in control, that they're controlling everything at that point, and physical abuse is just one more trait for them to get what they want. When you start to stand up for yourself emotionally, physical is another way to control you.
Yes,
So let's
definitely.
watch the rest of this video and see what they have to say. Maybe they have answers to your questions that we haven't even answered yet. So let's watch the rest of it.
View of their achievements and can be extremely self-obsessive. People with covert narcissism have the aching need for admiration too, but alongside this are insecure and often in distress. Call this vulnerability, if you like, but the best way to understand covert narcissism is by picturing someone who has low self-esteem, is oversensitive to criticism, yet has a sense of superiority that may not be so obvious. The thing with narcissism is that it can be challenging to diagnose, because how do you reconcile these conflicting traits? For instance, being charming and yet obsessive with seeking attention, plus conditions like depression or anxiety may trigger some of these traits, which are identical to narcissistic behaviors. Aside from these categories I've just talked about, there is a second classification, or types, if you like, of narcissists that I think you should be aware of. Some of you may have heard the classic vulnerable and malignant narcissists. The classic narcissists are the typical narcissists, the kinds you think of immediately. There's a mention of the word braggarts, always fishing for compliments and feeling like they're entitled to special care. If you are that person, or know someone who automatically becomes bored when the discussion topic switches from them to someone else, then they're likely a good example of a classic narcissist. Malignant or toxic narcissists shine best in the areas of manipulation and exploitation. These types of narcissists are somewhat borderline sociopaths or psychopaths because they have a brand of vileness that sets them apart from the other two categories of narcissists. They relish deceit and aggression and may find enjoyment in the suffering of others. Fortunately, just about 1% of people are affected by this kind of narcissism, with most of them being young people. The vulnerable narcissists are the third class here, and although people in this category are mostly introverted, they still go around with an air of superiority around them. Vulnerable narcissists often have fragile egos and deep-seated insecurity, and manipulation isn't very far from them. It's the case of gaining admiration and pity by being suspicious generously. The main thing that sets narcissists apart is their ability to feel. They may think too highly of themselves, but can experience guilt or shame when their inconsiderate behavior is brought to their.
Hey guys, one thing that I want to tell you really quickly, I want to give you a short definition of abuse because so many people get abuse mistaken with other words. Abuse is basically anything that is withheld that is given freely. So let's say somebody says, I love you, and you don't say anything back, or you just, okay. You you withheld your love, especially if you love them. So you're abusing them by not acknowledging their love towards you. Or you say, hey, great job. You don't say nothing. That's emotional abuse. So abuse is anything withheld from something that is given naturally. So I just wanted to say that because that brought up in this part of the video what popped into my head. So wanted to discuss that with you guys. Does that make sense? Can y'all put a 1 if it does? Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and
Their
that
attention.
definitely looks like
It might be a short moment of remorse, but they still feel it, right? And some of them even attempt techniques to help improve their relationships. Narcissists generally do not set out to harm others or be violent. They simply lack the empathy to focus or care about others compassionately. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, please hit that subscribe button for more content about self-development and improving your life. It really helps our new channel, and your kindness will go a long way. Unlike narcissists, sociopaths engage in manipulative behavior and deceive others for their pleasure. They have zero regard for rules and just break them without concern for others. So while a narcissist may act out of compassion simply to feel good, it's a more calculated process with a sociopath. They find pleasure in being manipulative and often enjoy toying with others. Something else that makes the sociopath harder to read is that they can come off as quite charming. It's why it's easy to dismiss their behavior or not detect it for a long time. A common trait you might want to look out for in a sociopath is feigned emotions. A person that tends to act warm and friendly before perpetrating harm may be showing signs of sociopathy. Think of people you know who lie excessively simply to get what they want, constantly blame others for their actions, or try to manipulate by threatening suicide. Can sociopaths form connections? Yes, they can. However, these relationships are a lot more likely to end up a mess because of how much they disregard the needs and rights.
I'm going to do a little poll here. How many of you in the chat have ever dated somebody and when you decided to break it off, the first thing they said is, I'm going to kill myself? Have any of you ever dated or been romantically attached to somebody that if you broke it off, they kind of went on their way and before long you heard, I'm just going to kill myself? And they just hung on to that card? Well, this is a sociopath right here. So type that in the chat if you've ever dated somebody that has exhibited that behavior. Kim says, is this nature or nurture? Are they born this way or do they develop into it? Well, the sociopath that we learned the other day, the sociopaths are born. Wait, no. Psychopaths are born. Sociopaths are created by their environment.
Yeah.
Well, fine, I'm just going to kill myself. Yes?
Yeah. I was
Have
just
you ever
gonna
dated
add,
somebody like that?
well, I was just gonna add, going back to the emotional abuse, it can also be whenever, let's say, um, you did something, you did you got an A, or let's say you got a B on a paper you worked really hard on, and instead of saying, "Hey, man, congratulations, you got a B in that," a narcissist would probably say, "Well, you didn't get the A." They instead of complimenting you, you cleaned your room, but did you vacuum? You know, so there's always something. They withhold the praise because they're gonna find something else that you didn't do. That's also emotional abuse.
Right,
Because you're never
right.
praised for anything that you've done. I just wanted just to give that little nugget.
Well, thank you. Well, the sociopath, I don't know if they're going to say it or not, but the sociopath is basically the criminal offenders. The psychopath is more of the serial killer.
Mhm.
And for some reason, that sounds backwards, but that's what I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But the sociopath has a conscience. They just are very impulsive. They deviate back into behaviors that, for some reason or another, they cannot control. The psychopath is based on no conscience, and they're quick to just get what they want. It. I want to be clear on all these personal um, mental afflictions that they coexist together. They can at times coexist together. You can have a psychopath slash sociopath slash um, narcissist slash um, person. What's it called? Histrionic person. You can have all these different personality disorders, and it's very difficult to tell them apart because they're so closely significant. Let's continue on with the video.
Of the other person. And this right here is the major difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. You might miss it if you're not paying as much attention, but because psychopaths do not experience emotions like regular humans, they cannot build emotional connections with others. Whether it's love, intimacy, or attachment, psychopaths are entirely incapable of experiencing these emotions. Psychopaths exhibit violent behaviors more than two other groups, so you might expect them to automatically be serial killers, rapists, murderers, or mastermind criminals. But not all psychopaths are these things. However, these people are even more calculated than sociopaths and can easily commit these crimes. It doesn't even help that they lack empathy, control, or understanding of boundaries. Compared to sociopaths, psychopathy is often regarded as innate rather than learned. The easiest way to identify a psychopath is their lack of empathy or inability to feel guilty for wrongdoings. But you also want to look out for behaviors like excessive meanness. Yes, we all can be mean, but the degree of this trait in a psychopath is simply unfathomable because they often find causing pain entertaining. Keeping that in mind, you can easily tell that unlike narcissists, who can feel some degree of guilt for their misdoings, this feeling completely escapes a psychopath. A psychopath is not going to feel the tiniest remorse for hurting you, because they simply don't care. And since some narcissists lack empathy too, you might confuse them with sociopaths. But pay attention to this. Sociopaths are more interested in asserting control over others, while narcissists do all they do simply to be admired. Sociopaths approach harm with more intentionality, unlike narcissists who hurt people mostly because they are unaware of the needs and feelings of the other. I also talk about spotting psychopathy in children in my previous video, which you can check out in the description. So in there's all that talk about the antisocial and aggressive traits to look out for in teens and children. And it's a similar situation if you're dealing with narcissism or sociopathy in children. But the real challenge with narcissism in children is that it mostly goes undiagnosed until later in the child's life. Some people get their diagnosis when they're around 25 because the belief is that this is when a person's personality really solidifies. Before then, parents sometimes write off the unusual behaviors as ADHD or just regular juvenile misdoings. And it's pretty much the same situation with sociopathy and psychopathy in kids. Children change behaviors too often as they grow and discover themselves. So a misdiagnosis would do so much harm. However, you should still act swiftly if you notice strange behaviors like unusual violence or antisocial behavior in your child. Talk to a professional. Hear what they have to say, because you really don't want to build children who cannot grow into wholesome adults, able to relate with their environment and the world. Differentiating between psychopaths and sociopaths is even more tricky since there are a lot of similarities between both, and they both fall under the antisocial personality disorder spectrum. Think of it this way: psychopathy is innate, while sociopathy is learned. A kid who lives in a dangerous neighborhood might learn to be a criminal to survive. They may understand their shortcomings and may not be very comfortable with it at first, but years and years of living lawlessly eventually get ingrained in them and become second nature. With psychopaths, it's an entirely different ballgame. Any type of connection a psychopath forms with someone else is entirely for exploitative purposes. Some research has simply come to the conclusion that psychopaths have a different brain function. And because the psychopath is great at maintaining emotional control, it can be really tough to detect criminal behavior in them. In my previous video on the topic, I also talk about the best psychopathy treatments being those that utilize diverse options, including psychotherapy and the development of behavioral skills. Cognitive and dialectical behavioral therapies are two kinds I find particularly interesting for treating personality disorders generally. Essentially, the professionals help their clients understand their symptoms and find healthier ways to handle the massive emotions. Experts also sometimes recommend medications that can lessen the symptoms, especially challenges with anxiety and depression. But in all, nothing beats combined treatments as regards calming certain impulses triggered by personality disorders. There are a lot more ways to help yourself or someone you care about who's struggling with their emotional health. I've found that support is really essential in transforming emotional health, so don't be afraid to offer or welcome it in your healing journey. Discussing all of these differences with you is really to help you recognize the patterns, whether in yourself or in someone else. Let's talk a bit about navigating relationships with narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. You should know that these kinds of relationships can be highly unpleasant and even dangerous. It's best to end the relationship if you're suffering emotional or physical violence, no matter how difficult this may seem. And maybe it's not you. Maybe you've noticed some of these traits in a loved one's relationship. You may need to intervene because remember how we talked about psychopaths and sociopaths being excessively manipulative. Moreover, abuse victims often find it too hard to share their problems, but you will be doing them so much good by, first of all, empathizing with the victim, then finding the best way to keep them far away from the abuser. It's also very unlikely for someone diagnosed with any of these disorders that think they need help. So if you suspect that someone has it, or maybe that you do, seeking therapy is a great place to begin. I hope you found this session eye-opening and would love to hear what you think in the comments. Don't forget.
That is such an awesome video. I've watched it like 3 times and I really enjoy it. And I would suggest that you guys go and watch it as well if you really enjoyed it. We got some questions here and I don't know the answer to this one. Maybe you do, Karla. She's asking, is there prevalence data like 1% to 4%? I don't even know what that means.
No, there isn't any prevalence data, and that's kind of what I was talking about, earlier. There, to my knowledge, right? So I can only speak to my knowledge, and granted, I've been out of college now since 2017, right? And I've been on the social work realm since then, not so much, working in with my master's in criminology. But, to my knowledge, with narcissism especially, it is very hard for us to say, because we just don't have enough data. There's just not enough people to come forward and say, "Hey, I suffer from this," because that's part of their, like I was trying to explain earlier, that's part of the disorder, right? They feel like they are on top of the world. I know everything. Why am I going to go to therapy? And so it's hard for us to say, more so like, with people who have any type of cancers, hey, 1 in 8, 1 in 5, 1 in whatever, certain percentage, 25% of women, and I'm making this stuff up, guys. I don't know, 25% of women will suffer with breast cancer, 30%. I mean, I wish that we could have numbers like that for you guys to kind of understand, how it works, but we just don't have enough data because these people are not going to come forward. No one is going to come forward and say, hey, I think I need some therapy because I have a fetish and I want to kill people and I want to chop off their feet, or the eyeball killer. I want people's
Yeah,
eyeballs.
yeah.
I mean, they're just not going to, so we find out after the fact, but that's too late for us, right? That's too late, it's then, it's after the fact. So,
Right. Okay. Well,
yeah.
thank you.
I
Thank
kind
you for
of
that.
If you'll let me, I just kind of want to say this. I wish that that video that we watched kind of went into more of what emotional control looks like, and kind of what it looks like. And we know it. Maybe you guys know it, but I just kind of want to point out what it looks like. So the emotional control is going to be when a person is able to detach themselves, right? And they have zero emotions. So you could be crying your eyes out, and that narcissist is sitting there just staring at you and just looking at you like, and they'll even tell you, like, can't you control yourself? And you're in the
Yeah,
middle of
what's
a
wrong with
breakup, you're
you?
in the middle. Yeah, and they are able to control those emotions. So you never know if a narcissist is hurt, if you've hurt their feelings or whatever, because they can suppress that emotion perfectly, where other people, like myself, I'm gonna cry, I'm a crier, I'm gonna cry, you're gonna know that I'm upset because because that's just how, normal people, that's how we
Right.
express ourselves, where a narcissist is going to have extreme control over those emotions. You won't be able to read those emotions at
So let me
all.
ask you a
That's why.
question. Let me ask you a question. So
Mhm,
this narcissist is unable
mhm,
to sit there and cry and do this and that and the other. Would
mhm.
you believe also that the narcissist has the capability of kind of, let's say, being a chameleon, so to speak? Maybe a method of their control would be at one point, while they don't cry and they don't do this, and this one point, well, they're going to throw you for a loop when you're not crying and you done crying and they start crying. Do you get what I'm saying? Like they
Mhm,
flip the script on you
mhm,
because of
mhm,
the psychopathic it's like a show. It's almost like acting, Well, I've seen her cry all this time. Now she's not crying, so the tears are cried out. So now I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna I'm gonna act like she acts to get that control from her. You know what I'm saying?
mhm.
Would you that's possible to be a chameleon in that effect?
Oh yeah, they're definitely gonna be chameleons. The charm, that's what they're talking about, the charm, it goes both ways. If a narcissist feels like, hey, if I get emotional, with her right now, I'm gonna gain control over her and I'm gonna get what I want, for her to stay, and not leave, whatever. If it is to their benefit, those tears will come out,
Right.
but if they know that it is a lost cause, you're not going to come back or whatever, no, they won't. They won't. But only if it benefits them, then you'll see that those emotions come out. But then you've got to ask yourself later on, reflecting back, you got to ask yourself, was it real? you know, or fake, and that's when, you got to
Right.
ask, like, did they gain something from it? You staying, you buying them this, or you buying them that, or you giving them money, whatever it is, because they're going to exploit you in any way that they can, with financially, emotionally to get you to stay, so yeah,
The only reason
that's
I asked that, because I want to share a little personal stuff here, is because um, I've been in relationship throughout the years where, and this sounds bad based on what we're talking about, but the individual has literally been crying and begging and pleading, for me to change, and I've literally just sat there emotionless without any kind of empathy, without any of the going on. And, it didn't really register in my brain the type of pain that I was causing at that point. It
hmm
it was almost like there was no commitment or attachment, should I say. There was no attachment to that pain whatsoever. Like I could not really understand that level of how could this person be crying and be hurt so deeply by what I did. I mean,
hmm yeah. And that, I mean, and like we talked about, before, remember, just because you did that, Marty, does not classify you as a narcissist, right?
right, right,
Because we all have narcissistic traits. There's characteristics in us all, that you could have this, you could have that. That's why the DSM says, hey, they've got to have, out of these 9 characteristics, we have to prove that they have at minimum 5 of these, right?
right,
So probably in that situation with that person, it was probably maybe very easy for you to state, hey, I just don't love you in the same way to continue this relationship. So while you were probably being very honest about not having that love towards that person, and maybe sitting across while they're falling apart, you were unable to look at that in that way because there was no love there for that person. Now if it was somebody that you loved and cared for, and they were telling you were ending the relationship, you were ending it for whatever reason, but you still had a lot of love and care for that person, then maybe you would see it differently. Maybe you just didn't
right,
see it
exactly.
differently, because the love was not there. You
Right,
realized at some point, like, I don't love you, and at the same point, at the same time, we don't know the other person, right? We don't know, if they were trying to manipulate you. I'm going to use my tears and everything, to manipulate you to get you to stay, so, that, we just, there's just a lot of unknowns there, but and
right,
I kind of want to throw that disclaimer out there, just because you may display one thing does not mean that you are a narcissist.
right,
Again, that
right,
word gets thrown around so much, so we do want to let the audience know, like, because you are, as we move on and as we talk about things and as I describe things, and as we go along, you might find yourself thinking just like Marty, whoa, I have experienced that, or I have done that, I'm a narcissist. No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that,
right,
hey,
right.
you have a characteristic, but that doesn't mean that you are a narcissist.
Well, the reason that I wanted to discuss any of this tonight, guys, those of you in chat that are hanging on to the good stuff, this is obviously good stuff as well. It's just a lot of clinical verbiage, a lot of clinical walkthrough, and I wanted to get with Carla to be able to walk through it clinically, so we give you the appropriate lingo, the appropriate definitions. That way, you don't get caught up in the misconception of the words, because sometimes people, they hear a word and it's the word of the week. Well, you're being narcissistic. So every man on the planet is a narcissist. Every female on the planet is bipolar or whatever you want to say. It's the word of the week, but the there's so much more that goes along with a diagnosis. So be very, very clear when you're calling somebody this, because if you really do have those personality defects, it's doing them injustice, because most of the time they don't even want help, but for the select few that do, it's turmoil having this disease, or not disease, but disorder, and having people just throw out your disorder out there like it's nothing, so be very careful. And also, I wanted to, the case that we're going to bring up tonight and talk about, I want you to look at the wording that we talked about tonight, and there's a lot that goes on in this woman's life from a young age that created this person. There was a movie made about her. It was called Monster. I think Charlize Theron played the role. This lady's name is Eileen Warnos. She was the first um, woman serial killer in the U.S. And she went through a lot. And I want to play a little bit about her life on this special that I found. And I want you to look, and instead of feeling sorry for her, I want you to look at it in a total different realm, because we can feel sorry for somebody because of their afflictions or because of their lifestyle that they grew up in. But the reality of it is, we all have a choice at one particular point to either get help or to choose the path that we want of least resistance. Does that make sense? Because we all have that capability. It's 2024. There's no reason why people should be so hell bent and say mental health's out of whack and we don't have the capability to get help and all this stuff. That's not true. It's because most of the time people do not want help. It's easier to blame the diagnosis or lack of diagnosis and say, well, I was raised in this environment, or I was raised with this parent, or I didn't have a father, or this, that, and the other. Well, there's a lot of things out there, and there's a lot of people, such as myself and Karla, that will guide you to a different outcome if you just get honest and open with yourself enough to be able to trust in the process. So that's my little disclaimer there, and I wanna go ahead and start the video on Eileen Warnos, and I want to start it a little bit after it began because this is the better part of it. So please be mindful. It is there are some parts of it that are a little disturbing, but we're all mature and grown ups in here, so don't strike me. Okay? And here we go. Listen to what she says right here.
By everyone.
That's right, I was. That's why I don't care if I'm executed and leave this planet.
If anyone was destined to end up here on death row, it was probably Lee Wuornos. Psychologists sketch a portrait of a damaged person with a lurid history of abuse that began in childhood. Abandoned by her teenage mother when she was just 6 months old, Lee was raised by her alcoholic grandmother and a cruel grandfather who regularly beat her with his belt buckle. When she was 2, her father committed suicide in jail, where he was doing time for kidnapping and raping a child. By 13, she'd been raped and was pregnant. At 14, she quit school. And when her grandfather kicked her out of home, Lee Wuornos' life on the road began. From age 15, Lee Wuornos worked prostitution's lowest and most dangerous trade. A hitchhiking hooker turning tricks from exit to exit on Florida's interstate highways.
Basically, I'd say I have 5 to 6 guys per day interested. They could be interested in 30, they could be interested in 40, they could be interested for 100. I wasn't too high priced, so I could keep the customers satisfied. And,
That all changed when she turned 33. After years of abuse and degradation at the hands of men, Lee Wuornos started evening the score. The killings all began like this. A middle-aged man pulled over to pick up Lee Wuornos. That's the first of just 2 facts on which everyone agrees. The way Lee tells it, she was just a hooker trying to turn a trick, and the men knew it. The state of Florida maintains she tricked her victims by posing as a damsel in distress. The men thought they were helping her out. Either way, the second fact on which everyone agrees is that Lee Wuornos shot them dead. Maybe you were just born bad. How do you...
Okay, hold on right there. I want to interject here because I've seen the movie and I've read about this individual. Part of her luring the men to their deaths was that she carried a picture of her some kids that she had in a picture, and she would tell the guys, "Well, I'm just trying to get home to my kids. I need a ride, or I need some money to get a bus to get home to my kids." So they would pick her up, and that would deploy. So there was premeditation there. Okay, so I want you to take that into account.
Boy, I don't know about you. I'm telling you, man. No, I wasn't born bad. You guys got it. See, I'm trying to tell you, man, they lied. They lied so bad to you all.
But you've been convicted of killing 7 men.
Everybody's looking at the number.
Does that not... You
I
killed
looked at the
7
number.
men, 7 strangers. Does that not make you a serial killer?
So I didn't kill them every day, did I? Did I go out there every day and say, I'm going to kill? If I did, there would
Well,
be
no,
hundreds.
it took you 12 months.
Yeah. And that's a hell of a lot of men I went through before the next jerk came along, and I used protection like a condom.
So it was
AIDS.
self-defense.
Yeah.
Lee, the first one, perhaps, the second, maybe, but
So what?
7 times?
So what?
Lee Wuornos began the last day of her miserable life on the road here, ordering her first beer at 11 in the morning. Close to broke, as usual, it was Lee's style to hustle quarters for the jukebox so she could listen to her favourite song. On this day, that was made easier by 2 undercover cops. They struck up a conversation with her, bought her some more beer, and then convinced her to step outside. I'm digging up bones, I'm digging up bones. Lee was prepared for anything but the 6 Florida police officers who arrested her. It was from this point the story of the first female serial killer becomes truly perplexing. First, her videotaped confession. Go ahead and put the electric chair to me. I should have never done it, she told police. But by the time of her trial, Lee was pleading self-defense.
Loved you, didn't she?
Yes.
She said she'd do anything for you, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
Her case wasn't helped when Tyria Moore, now very much her ex-lover, turned star witness for the prosecution.
And in order for her to say what you wanted her to, you lied to her, right?
Yes.
But it gets worse. Tyria had another deal going with the arresting police. They were trying to sell Hollywood the movie rights to Lee Wuornos's life and crazy times.
Why did you lie to her about those number of things?
Because I wanted her to keep talking about the offenses so I would be cleared.
District Attorney Rick
That was her
Ridgway is
lover.
one of the only officials willing to talk about the Wuornos case anymore. The police certainly won't, out of sheer embarrassment.
There was a tremendous amount of almost frenzy about the case, and everybody wanted to get a scoop on the next guy about the case. And there were so many people who were willing to pander to that in order to be the one who gets quoted or who gets the movie made about them.
People from your own sheriff's office.
Well, unfortunately, yes, they did.
As the prosecutor, were you dismayed by that?
Well, to put it mildly, we went through the roof when we found out about it.
In the end, it was only the producers of this American TV movie who were able to cash in on Lee's story. Tyria and the police's conspiracy to get rich quick came to nothing once they were caught. But that hasn't stopped Lee Wuornos suspecting that someone, somewhere, wants to exploit her name.
It's making me get bitter, evil, angry. I've never been before in my life. Worse than even out there with those men. This is evil, what those people have done to me.
Do you feel anger or even hatred towards men?
I never hated men, but now I do. I mean, not all. I have a category. I hate those male. God. I hate those male cops real bad because they're dirtballs. The cops, the judges, the lawyers, they're all male.
I have made peace with my Lord, and I have asked forgiveness.
The final
am sorry
twist
that my
in this
acts of
already
self-defense
mad
ended up
tale
in court.
was when Lee
I
Wernos
take full
decided to plead no
responsibility for my
contest
actions.
to the remaining 6 murder charges.
I sentence you in case number 91-463 to death for the murder of Troy Burris.
Her lawyer, Steve Glazer, found himself in the bizarre position of helping his client take the express route to the electric chair.
County case number. I sentence you to death for the murder of David Spears.
Thank you. And probably see, I'll be up in heaven while y'all rotting in hell.
In effect, though, weren't you trying to kill your client?
It's not what I was trying to do, okay? It's what she wanted to have done to her. She was tired of being in the spotlight. She was tired of reporters and police and lawyers, everyone making a career off of her. She did not like the man-hating killer label. She didn't like the lesbian killer angle. She didn't like what people were saying about her. And she knows if she has to go to trial 5 more times, she's going to be for the next 10 years.
Do you still believe she was competent to make that decision?
Without a doubt.
Okay, there will be an automatic appeal. You have the right to an appeal. Mr. Glazer, is that going to be handled by you
May
or the
your
public
wife and
defender?
kids
Your Honor,
get raped.
I would ask that you appoint
Right.
the public office.
Okay, I'll appoint the public defender's office to handle the appeal. There's one other thing that I want to say that I think needs to be said.
I know I was raped. You weren't nothing but a bunch of scum.
Therefore, these proceedings are now
Putting
concluded.
somebody who was raped to death.
Do you still want the chair?
There's no sense in having me tormented for the rest of my life when I don't deserve to be tormented. I did what anybody else would do. And so there's only clemency or the chair. You make your pick, people, because that's the only way it's going to be.
Why did you adopt Lee Wernos?
For one reason and one reason only. We wanted her to know what it felt like to be part of a family.
Born-again Christian Arlene Prowley has a fondness for adopting stray animals. When she adopted Lee, she planned a life together on her farm. Now she'd be happy just to keep her alive. That's it. Okay, that's about enough. There you go. Well, tell me this. How did you counsel Lee?
I told her to go for the life in prison. I told her that that would be the best. I told her that God could use her within the prison to help other girls that were hurting, maybe didn't have a relationship with Jesus, and that she could really be used mightily there. And we fought bitterly over it. She said that no human being had the right to tell another human being what to do with their life.
Stop the murders, deter the crimes away.
Not much phases the singing lawyer Steve Glazer. Not the three within 3 years. She's waived her right to appeal.
If he hears no last-minute stays from the governor's office, the electrode then is placed on top of the inmate's head. It's an actual cap with an electrode inside. It's secured onto his head. One of these electrodes here is then fastened onto the top of the headpiece.
Alone and lost in her own nightmare, Lee Wernos is an American horror story. She could escape death row, but her bitterness and hate will see Lee become the first woman in over a century to be executed in Florida. Aren't you afraid?
No, I'm not afraid. I know where I'm going. I'm going to be with the Lord.
Thank you,
Take
too.
care of yourself and everybody else.
Do you want to die? You want to?
Oh man, if I was to leave this planet, it wouldn't be no big deal to me because this is a wicked, wicked world. Wicked world.
Okay, before I go on, I'd like to thank 60 Minutes Australia for doing that piece and allowing me to comment on it and share a little insight on it. You guys in chat, tell me what you think. That was quite an interview with that individual. Is there anybody in here? Let me know what you think about the Eileen Wuornos case. It's an old one, and obviously she's deceased at this point, but at the very beginning, they were talking about how she grew up. Do you believe that that shaped who she became? I mean, because if there was already a tendency for her to become who she became, all those situations that she experienced did nothing but speed up the process. What do you think, Carla?
Well, I mean, definitely, definitely agree with you. I mean, you know, uh, and I don't know if the audience, caught, we saw some of that emotional control, and we saw some of those traits come up, where she was talking even, she's facing death row, she's still not able to have accountability, and everything was about me, me, me. She even said, "Why are you looking at the numbers?" Because she didn't even want to talk about that. I mean, that's how much of a in the narcissistic mindset, that she had. Everything is still about her. She isn't able. She hates. Who did she say she hated? She hated the cops. She hated the judge. They all happened to be male, so it was easy, convenient for her. But she hated all of them. But why did she hate them? Because those were the people that were holding her, accountable for it, and her gaslighting everybody was just, you know what? Just kill me then. Just kill me. Just kill me. If that is what you want, if that's what we're gonna do, just kill me. Just kill me. And it was still a form of her still kind of controlling the narrative, even
Okay.
even all the way to the end. That was
So
interesting to watch.
let me ask you, let's go back in time. Let's say the internet and true crime community was available at that time. Do you believe that people would have been siding with her and claiming that she was innocent and it was self defense of her killing five individuals, five males at that? Just speculation, of course.
Yeah. I don't
Do you
know.
believe that the internet would have been on her side and said she's innocent? How about y'all, chat? What do y'all think, too?
Yeah. I don't know. If we were to go back in time with the technology, kind of that we have now, what would people say? I think it was going to be the embarrassment of the police department, because how is it that you let seven, now that's seven that we know of, right? Because she could never, nobody that interviewed Miss Warnos could ever even get her to even think anymore, because as soon as we were talking about numbers or whatever, she would fly off the handle. That's that gaslighting and everything, where she would tell people, may your kids get raped, may this happen, may that happen. Nobody could ever really talk to her because it was something that she wasn't admitting. That was just the seven that they said, that they could tie to her, but never never did she admit to any more. She admitted to the crimes that she did, to get herself there, and things like that. But we could never get her to do it much more than that. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I
because
don't
I
know.
mean, I I I would go on a limb to probably speculate that there would be a lot of supporters that would say, you know, there's they did it wrong. They're framing this poor innocent woman. She was a prostitute. She had been raped. She had been this. She was just defending herself. Well, she took
Mhm.
the gun to all the crimes. She had the gun. She didn't take the gun from the man. She had the gun in her purse. So whenever the
Mhm.
man started to undress or to give money or whatever, as soon as they started that, she shot and killed them. So it's not like there's only one of them that I can remember that attacked her and physically beat her up. And I think that was the second one that she killed.
Mhm.
That that she just started killing them before they put their hands on her. The first one, I think she did it out of fear of all the other times that she'd been victimized
Mhm.
and survival instinct kicked in, but still killing is killing regardless of the intent. The motive was you killed the person for personal gain. She robbed them.
Mm-hmm.
She stole a car. You know, she went out every night looking for a different person to victimize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, most certainly, everything, about this lady, she, you know, and another thing too is that she doesn't give a lot of detail, in the clips, that I have seen, she just alludes to, hey, I was raped. Okay, but when you try to get her to corner her to say, okay, well, when were you raped? Who raped you? When did this happen? It happened, blah, blah, blah. I mean, she just flies off the handle. So, so I don't know that she would have gotten that much support just because there just wasn't enough there to really feel sorry for her. I mean, she would throw out their key words, key phrases, but could never really back them up. So I think, for her, I think in the end, it was the money, the money. She now was responsible for her lover who didn't
Yeah.
work. So now in order for them to eat, in order for them to have a room for the night, right? Because she didn't have a home, yet now she's responsible for this other person that she started to really care for, that really showed her, love for the first time and everything. Now she's got to take care of her, or in a sense that she doesn't work. So now it comes that desperation of really needing money. And I think at the end of the day, I think that's why she did all of the killing. I mean, in my opinion, she would start killing these men because she needed to pay. If she couldn't hustle for the money, you were only giving her, $50, and she couldn't hustle you for more, you ran that risk as a male, that you were going to get killed, because she was hoping you had more in your pocket, steal your car, and all of that, and I think that all of that was, in a way, premeditated. She knew that she needed a car, she knew she needed more money, and so, if she asked you certain questions, what do you do for a living? I'm a doctor. She was going to assume, hey, you have more money,
Yeah.
and things like that, but yeah, I think that premeditation definitely there, especially in the end. And I think in the end, I think it took so long for her to get caught because in the very beginning, it was just about her. She didn't have
Yeah.
anybody that we know of that she had to provide for. I think it just switched when she had to provide for somebody. She went on a killing spree because she needed more money.
Right. Paula says, I'm sure she would get some supporters. Some are opposed to LA and law and order, and they would rather see a guilty person go free. And that is true. I mean, look at some of the cases that we have going on. The case that I talk about almost nonstop on my channel, the Idaho 4, there's obviously a lot of anti-LE. The law did it wrong. They planted the sheep. They did this, they did that, whatever. I don't even want to get into that right now because we're not talking about that case, but that's just an example. I believe back then, if we did have the internet and social media, people would find a way to um, validate the perpetrator rather than validate the victims. And for some reason, we've escaped that compassion where we don't focus anymore on the victims as much as we do the perpetrator. We want to defend the perpetrator. We want to make excuses for the perpetrator. It was abuse. It was lack of parents. It was this. It was that. Unfortunately, I don't know very many people. Since we're talking statistics, 1 in 10, I would say probably 7 out of 10 people since the 70s has been abused. One sense of the word, physical, emotional, sexual, spiritual, you know, I would say 7 out of 10, and it might even be higher. It might be 10 out of 10. But I know that a lot of people have suffered through a lot of different areas. And instead of speaking up, we were told just to shut up and keep your mouth shut about it. Nobody want to You don't want to talk bad about the family. You don't want to drag our family name through the mud, or nobody needs to know your business, or this, that, and the other. And when you have that type of upbringing, and you have an alcoholic, like in her case, an alcoholic grandfather and a grandmother who wasn't there, present in the fact, and she was being victimized by the school kids at a young age, doing sexual acts for validation. All this stuff just kind of breeds personality disorder because it's the traumatic experience that people don't understand. Another area, and that leads me to our final topic of the night, I want to talk about trauma bonding and how this could potentially create a serial killer or somebody that's very sociopathic or psychopathic. So, while I'm pulling up the diagram, if you kind of give us a little intro on trauma bonds, Karla.
Yeah, I mean, trauma bond is just definitely something that is extremely powerful, because you get a lot of back and forth. So a person is going to be trauma bound to their perpetrator because they may not have they in that moment, they feel like they can't, really, do anything. They've gotten used to that. That emotional roller coaster. Marty touched on this a lot earlier. So, thinking back to the withholding, right? When he talked about, you're withholding your love, you're withholding things, that's when the trauma bond begins. Because if I freely love you, if I freely am showing you love, I am doing all of these things. I'm hugging you, I'm holding your hand, I'm putting my arm around you in public, I'm doing all of these things. And then one day I start to withhold it. You are now in the rat race, and you're doing things that, okay, well, let me do this so I can maybe get back to that point in the beginning where I was being loved and adored and hugged and told I was loved and valued and all that. And they may breadcrumb you along the way, right? And they may, show you a little bit of love, and then bam, they withhold it again altogether. So then now you're fighting to try to feel that again, and it just creates an abusive, circle and a kind of a rat race. And in reality, what happened is that you're never going to get back to that place because that's not who that person is. And that for us is, as the victims, is very hard for us to let go of because we were there. We saw it. We felt it. You can't tell me that, and I'm just going to use Marty as an example, right? But you can't tell me that Marty didn't love me because Marty was hugging me. He was holding me. He was telling me he loved me, and you feel all that love in the beginning, but then when they withhold it, you're chasing after it. And in reality, Marty was a narcissist, and he was just love bombing me. So that was never going to be him. He only did that to get me. That's the chase. That's the trauma bound, because so many people would be telling me, well, if Marty doesn't love you, isn't telling you he loves you, isn't valuing you, my sister would say, leave him, leave him, leave him. And in my mind, I'm gonna, well, I can't leave them because, maybe if I would have kept the house clean, if I would, maybe I need to lose some weight, maybe if I just lose some weight, maybe if I just keep the house clean, maybe if I just pick up the kids on time, or whatever it is, I'm gonna get back to that. But in reality, that was never Marty to begin with. He only love bombed me to get me to like him enough for me to, stay with him. So we were never going to get that. Because that's just not him. And that's kind of like trauma bound people. And it's a very hard, like I said, it's so hard to leave because one day Marty may hold my hand. after months of never holding my hand, one day he may reach over and just hold my hand. And just holding my hand, it's gonna make me feel like I'm on top of the world because maybe out of that, maybe he's gonna hug me, but we just never get to that original picture that we were chasing. But it's so hard for us because we saw it, we felt it, we touched it, and you can't tell me that otherwise. And that's the trauma bound, kind of in a nutshell, kind of explained, and I can't see the chat, but if anybody has any more questions, about the trauma bound, I'll be happy to kind of, let go in more of a detail. But in a nutshell, it's just a race but you got to think though, at one point, the abuser gave you that. You can't chase something that was never given to you, right? So it was given to you. It was just given to you in a very manipulative, calculating manner. And that's it. Usually that happens in the beginning to hook you, to get you. And that's kind of what trauma bound means, and it's hard. It's hard to come out of it, and when you're coming out of it, they want you. They want you because they're exploiting you for something, whether it's financial gain or something, so it's a very hard to leave you. Yeah. I can't tell what that says. What does it say?
Okay, this is the diagram of a trauma bond. It's a triangle. At the top, it's the perpetrator. On one side, it says rescuer, and the other side, it says victim. Well, based on what Karla was just saying, draw a triangle, and at the top, put perpetrator. On one other side, put rescuer, and one other side, put victim. And what happens with this triangle is you're shifting goals. I mean, shifting sides. So if the perpetrator is obviously the one person who's trying to make you their victim, or once you try to empower yourself and go up the triangle to be powerful, they shift down to your rescuer. And once you're getting too powerful, well, they shift back up and then knock you down to the victim. So it's an interchanging role. And to get out of that trauma bond, you have to seek support so that you don't need one person to become your all. So whenever you're dealing with somebody who is a narcissist, somebody who's all about control and wanting to keep you in a particular role, trauma bonds were very popular with the Stockholm syndrome, meaning that there was a group of bank robbers. I think it was in the early 70s, maybe middle 70s. I don't know. But anyways, they robbed a bank. They took hostages. And by the time the hostages were released, probably most of the hostages were begging the police not to take them to jail because they had convinced the hostages of their reasoning to rob that bank, if that makes sense. So you try to either become the person's rescuer to keep them at the victim, or you become their controller to keep them at the victim, and you interchange all these roles in order to maintain the control that you want of another person. So trauma bonding happens whenever you're in a job and maybe your boss is very controlling and very demanding. And the only time that they feel that you're worthy is when you're apologizing all the time. I'm sorry, I'll do better. This, that, and the other. Threatening to fire you or threatening to demote you or whatever. Or when you come in one day and you say, well, I'm having problems at home. So they go into the rescue mode and they're like, okay, I understand. I've had problems too in my house, so I understand it. Tell me more about your problems and this, that, and the other. So it let down your guard to let them in, and you start to build up the side. But once they see you building too high up that side of the trauma bond, what do? They run back up to become the perpetrator and knock you back down to keep you in that victim role. So I hope this makes sense a little bit. Let me know what you think, or if you've had any kind of experiences in your life where you felt like somebody has tried to control you in a relationship, possibly in your family or anything of that nature. Type that in the chat. You don't have to get personal. Just say, yes, I understand what you're talking about, or no, I don't have a clue, you lost me. If you have any questions for either one of us, feel free to ask them. We will answer them to the best of our knowledge. I know this is a show based on true crime, but all this has a basis of true crime. That's why I'm saying that there's a lot of creators that don't go into the psychological portion of it. They just stick with this person is guilty because of this or this or this or this. There's more to it. Just because you're not given that does not mean that that person doesn't have personality disorder, doesn't have psychological issues, that they needed to be on medication. Maybe they're schizophrenic. Maybe they have a lot of abuse issues from their childhood. Maybe they have an anger toward their mother, and they hate women. Believe it or not, there's a lot of men in this world that hate women. And if you've encountered one of these men, you know who they are. They do anything and everything to destroy any woman in their path. They cannot be told what to do from a woman. They will not take suggestion from a woman. They will play the charmer to get a woman and then be hell-bound to destroy everything about that woman. If she's driven, motivated, loving, caring, then they go to their lengths and extremes to destroy them because they cannot have somebody more proficient in their mindset than themselves. Mr. Key says the psychological part is the fascinating part of it for me. The men's can be a beautiful thing. The mind can be a beautiful thing, but the side of the scale is incomprehensible. That's understandable.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get a good diagram, and I'll go on another live or something, and I'll be able to show you guys with some more examples that really show it. I have some at my office that I can show you that's more that you can see it better. Karla, what do you think about what I just said? Do you agree with that, or do you have any kind of anything to add or take away from it, or you know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because I mean, I like how we're, bringing up and discussing, just very simple things, when we talked about, like the emotional control, you've gotta, if you're going to be killing folks, you gotta have a level of control, of emotional control, right? Whichever serial killer or just true crime, that we're talking about, even people like Chris Watts, there was a level of emotional control there. And we've got to understand what that looks like, right? In order for us to, in order for us to dive into, the mind of, of even somebody like Chris Watts, right? Or Arlene Wuornos, she had an extreme, emotional control. And I like how we're, going back and looking at it from that angle, because not I mean, you're right, a lot of people on here, when they talk about true crime, they're talking about, just the crime, but very few dive in to, the bones of things, like we understand, that these people did horrible things, but we're not talking about necessarily about the horrible things that they did. We know that they did those things. We're talking about at the beginning, what did that, look like, and I certainly, I think that's important for us to know, because all of these serial killers, or just even killers in true crime, they all had, parents, they, and at some point, even at a young age, you can see some of these traits, and it's up to us as parents, to show our kids different ways. And, it's why we, teach empathy. That's not something that's learned. I mean, we've got to teach it. Our kids have to see us, get hurt and, and all that stuff. So they can learn like, oh, you got to say you're sorry. And that must have felt really bad. Or, we do those things to teach, so we don't,
Right.
But and I agree with you, I agree with you. Not a lot of people dive into the bones, and I think that's what you do that's different, is you dive in there, to get to the bones of things. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I believe because, like I tell the audience, I'm a very visual learner. So, therefore, in order for me to pick up on something, I have to be able to walk it through. There has to be a level of understanding. Even if I don't have the whole pieces, I can put the pieces there because in my training that I've had with criminal offenders, I've been able to put those pieces there because you understand the patterns of a criminal offender. And I know you understand that. The pattern is there. And anybody that's worked with criminal offenders, you will understand that pattern never changes. I don't care if you have their offspring that come through there, their uncles or cousins, or, that that family dynamic is there. If it's a family of drug dealers, a drug dealer is a drug dealer. They may have different tactics, but as far as the patterns, it's pretty much always the same. And I always used to tell my clients that. I said, because they'd ask me, they go, how come you're so knowledgeable of my life? I've only talked to you for 5 minutes and you're able to tell me who I am, what I'm about, and how I got here. And I tell them, I'd be like, because the pattern doesn't lie. There's a pattern and there's theories and that's why you learn these things, because they help you understand a person better than the surface. There's obviously something there that has directed them to sit in front of you that needs assistance. So
Oh,
Paula asked, what are your thoughts on Chad Dorman, total mental break? Can you tell me a little more on Chad Dorman? Because I'm really not too knowledgeable on that name. Do you
yeah,
know
I'm
who
not
Chad
either.
Dorman is? Tell us a little more, and we'll give you some insight. I'm going off camera, off and on, because I'm eating a tortilla and some food in it, so I don't want to be like smacking in front of y'all, on the camera. So hopefully you don't hear me smacking on the mic, but I'm still here. So Paula, give us some more insight on that case, and we'll be able to talk about it.
Yeah, I know nothing about that. That name just does not sound familiar for me. So,
She said, father in Oklahoma that shot his 3 sons.
father in
How
Oklahoma that shot 3 sons.
how recent is this? Um, y'all all know that case. How recent is it? When did it happen?
Yeah, when did it happen?
What year? I remember a case out of Oklahoma where maybe that's it. Jeff, do you know when it happened? Some more details about it. Do you want to come on the panel tonight to be able to talk about anything? I mean, it's this past year and high profile.
Just,
Man, I feel so
Man, I
inadequate
feel
right
lost.
now.
Yeah, I feel so lost. I have
His
not heard.
stepdaughter ran to the fire station to get help. Oh,
Mm.
let me look this up. Can you talk to them about what a mental breakdown is?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, definitely we could talk while you look that up, we could
Yeah.
definitely talk about let's talk about another one. Let's talk about, let's say, Chris Watts. He also killed his family, right? We know that he killed his two little girls, and his wife was pregnant when when he unalived her. And so when talking about like Chris Watts, right, and and killing his family, that was just it was very selfish, because for him at the time, he wanted to start a new life with somebody else. And it's kind of like, well, why did he do that instead? Just get the divorce. But but see, a lot of that's the narcissistic side when we're talking about, like, let's say Chris Watts. And of course, this is just my opinion, but he's not going to get a divorce. They're not going to get a divorce from the wife, because in their eyes that looks bad. They want to preserve their outer, what people are going to be thinking of them. So in their minds, I am, once again, I am all knowing. I can get away with this. If I kill, if I unalive my family, then I can be the victim, and I won't have to be the one to say, that I need a divorce. It's, so it just goes back to the preservation of their self-image, you know, and at that time, with Chris Watts, he was the one, the lady he had an affair with. She's the one that, he wanted that self-image, but didn't want to lose the other image with his wife, because she was on social media a lot. So, it just goes to the preservation of that person's, um, let's see here, to the preservation of that person. So you've got a lot of things
Okay.
going on, Marty. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of let you kind of take over. But I mean, we're not talking about Chris Watts. We're going to talk about, right here, what Marty's about to present.
Okay, so I pulled this up and you're right, Paula. You said the body cam was everywhere for quite a while. He confessed, but he got thrown out for Miranda violations. And I recently have studied on Miranda rights, and it's fresh on my mind. So I just read over this, and it said that a couple Miranda rights were gone against them. The first one said the defendant's Miranda rights were violated because Detective Ross failed to properly and fully advise Dorman of them prior to initiating the custodial interrogation of all statements obtained from Dorman during custodial interrogation to be suppressed, for the state shall not abduct any of these statements in the case in chief. I would take that to mean that, even if the defendant is talking, okay, even if you roll up at the scene and the defendant starts talking to you about the case. I'm sorry. He's distraught. He's saying, I'm sorry. I don't know why I just killed my kids, this, that, and the other. At that point, you can't let him keep talking without advising him of his Miranda rights, because a crime has been committed. You have to advise him that if he keeps talking, anything he says can and will be used against them. And this stems from the Miranda versus Arizona case back in 1968, I believe, where he was kind of forced to a confession, and that's where it all came from. But the second one said the defendant's Miranda rights were violated when the custodial interrogation continued after the defendant had unequivocally and unambiguously invoked his right to counsel when he told Detective Ross, I'll wait for a lawyer. I don't know. Give me a couple of days. I can't talk to a lawyer and get nice, good answers. Therefore, irrespective of the detective's failure to fully and properly advise Dorman of his Miranda rights, as immediately set forth above, all statements obtained during the custodial interrogation shall be suppressed, and the state shall not adduce any of these statements into their case in chief. That means that he still should have told him, hey, you need to quit talking if you're not gonna, if you're not, you, the policeman will not tell you to quit talking. He will tell you, hey, you got the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used during the court of law. At that point, Dorman should have stated he pled the fifth, man, because everything he continued to say, obviously it was thrown out because the officer failed to, read him his Miranda rights. Because obviously he was talking a lot. I don't know about the case, but if he was spitting a lot of information, being suppressed means that the court cannot hear that information because his Miranda rights were not read. So that basically, and I know that's not the question that you asked. You asked if he had a total meltdown, but reading this lets me know that he probably did, Who wouldn't after shooting their three kids, And then it said the detective failed to fully and properly advise Dorman of his Miranda rights prior to initiating his initial interrogation. So all the statements obtained from Dorman during the time will be suppressed. That is awful. Think about that. All the evidence that you just gained, invalid. The jury can't hear it. Nobody can hear that because a simple mishap such as not reading this individual the Miranda rights, that makes all that, whether it was a confession, whether it was just information, it's null and void. What do you think about that, Karla? Have you ever
Yeah,
have you ever heard of another case like that? I know there's a couple after Miranda versus Arizona, but I can't think of them right now.
I'm with you. I can't think of but I know that that just made the prosecution side harder because now because they had the confession, now they don't have the confession, and the jury isn't going to hear the confession. Now they have to go in and now they have to prove everything, which is going to be, probably maybe difficult for them to actually prove. But it would have been, a lot easier had they had the cop stopped, read him his rights, ensured that he understood, and if he said he needed the attorney, well, everything stops as soon as somebody says that they want the attorney or they want to talk to an attorney. So it's just going to make it that much more difficult, and then when you put it in the hands of the jury, is the jury really going to be able to piece everything together, because they're not going to see it, they're not going to see any of this footage, that is so crucial, to the case. I mean all of that is thrown out, so man, that is
Yeah, we're
hard.
about to watch. We're about to watch the body cam, so let's kind of watch it and give it a new perspective on basically um, what we just talked about. Y'all ready?
Let's
Let's
go.
go. Thank Law and Crime for supplying this body cam. We're just basically just giving commentary about it.
The shooter's still on the porch.
Get him right here. You got him on the porch.
We've asked about the last place we've been told.
You show me your hands now! Stand up and walk towards us! Stand up now! Walk towards us! Stand up with your hands up!
We know we got a visual in the mail. Not showing his hands, not following commands.
Stand up now!
Not showing hands or following commands. His name is Chad Dorman. Chad Dorman.
I know, but we can't.
220 first aid, and he's he's not complying. You know he's a shooter. Shoot him.
We gotta find cover first. We ain't no good if we ain't safe ourselves. Hey, no. We need to come from this side where we can see him. Don't take cover behind her. We see him. We're going to approach from this side. We got cover. Right here.
6 covered, 29 and 63 attack on.
Show us your fucking hands now. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up now. Stand up. Stand the fuck up. Get your hands out here. Tell them we're 21. It's in the air.
Those guys can confirm that there's people in the first aid, and that's the shooter. He's not complying. They need to take care of the
I got it.
victims. They have to shoot him and shoot him.
Man, I ain't trying to hurt nobody. I'm completely sober. Never did drugs a day in my life. 21. Get the EMS over here. Well, I did drugs when I was little, but I don't do drugs now. I'm sober. I'm not trying to fight you. 63. Get your butt inside. Gatlin, get your butt inside. We on primary? Now.
29, we got 3 kids down. 3 kids down, 16 down.
Gatlin. 63, we're 21. Have EMS respond over here.
You're clear, they're being advised. Robert 34, just started mass casualty response. 63, do you want them to respond to the Laurel Lindale address? Where exactly do you need them?
We're right in the front yard. What are you doing, man?
Hey, are you copying all this?
Can I roll over? I ain't gonna hurt you. I ain't gonna hurt nobody. You got anything on you? No, I ain't got nothing, man. Phone, that's it. I ain't mad. I ain't nothing. Just make sure that dog don't come out. I don't think he'll bite you. Just don't reach for him and try to grab him and pet him. All right. He won't bite you. What's going on, man? Nothing. Can I stand up? It's kind of uncomfortable. I'm gonna get you here in a second. I ain't running away. You can do whatever you want. Here. You the only one else inside the house? What? You the only one else inside the house? Yeah. Sit down right here. My daughter, she ran over to the fire department. Sit down. It's my stepdaughter. Put him in the cage. This is real. This is real.
They're all being advised they've left 2 additional medics. There's also air care flying, but they need an LV and medic coming. Yes.
Can you get the wallet out of my back pocket?
Shut up, dude. Yeah, the right to remain silent. Fucking use it.
Yes, sir.
Call. I'm on the boss right now. I'm almost there. Yeah, I did when Chief and Captain's away.
Hold on.
The firehouse is advising them that the male shot the entire family.
29-37.
You're clear.
Here.
Shooter's calling the force.
Get him
right now.
right here. Down on the
We've asked, that's the last place we've been told.
You show me your hands now! Stand up and walk to me! Walk towards us! Stand up now! Walk towards us!
Thank you. What do y'all think about that? I mean, once they put him in custody, once they put the handcuffs on him, at that point they should have read him his Miranda rights. I'm not a police officer, but when you put somebody in custody, the moment you put your handcuffs on them, I would believe at that point you're addressing, okay, you're under arrest for this. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. They should have never let him speak at all. What do you think, Karla?
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you absolutely, 1,000%. You don't just say, "Hey, guy, you have the right to remain silent." No, you have to say the entire thing, that they have the right to counsel, all of it from start to finish, in order for it to be valid, because once you say it, once you say everything from start to finish, if after that is being said, if the offender continues to talk, you're good, you're golden. We can use that, but you can't say the Miranda, you can't just say, "Hey, you have the right to remain silent," and continue on. I mean, you
Right.
have to say it all. You've got to say it all in the moment. I agree with you. If you're thinking about putting handcuffs on somebody, I mean, in that moment, before you do, you have to gotta read them. We have to read them those Miranda rights. You know, even if you're holding somebody, even if you're like, well, maybe the cop isn't quite arresting them because they don't know what they're arresting them for, but you've got to have those Miranda rights being said. And I do want to say, y'all been seeing the flickering of my lights in the background. I don't know if y'all have. I am under we are under a storm warning. So it's like
Oh
raining pretty
wow.
hard. It's raining pretty hard
Oh
out here.
wow.
I believe it's hail that I hear pounding on the roof. So if anything happens and I go off camera,
Okay.
that's why.
No
But
worries. No worries. We hope to stay safe.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's gonna be all right.
I mean, I've never heard of this case, but when he told him shut the fuck up, and he said something else after that when he threw him in the vehicle, that was so unprofessional. I mean, you gotta understand. You just saw 3 kids murdered, but at some point you have to keep your coos about you. You're not the judge, jury, and the executioner. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because at the end goal, right? Whenever we're faced with that, the end goal is that we want to get this person off of the streets. This person is dangerous. If they were able to kill these 3 little souls, I mean, they are dangerous. So, we always have to
Yeah.
keep that level head of we got to make this stick in order for them to be prosecuted correctly and in order for us to get what we need on the criminal side of things,
Exactly.
so
It's
because you don't want
very,
to let him get
very
away with
sad.
it.
Yeah, because I mean, like what we're talking about right now, those statements were suppressed, so obviously, they might not be valuable to be used in the trial at all.
Yeah, No, they're not gonna let that stuff come in. There's no way that on his side of it that they're gonna let that stuff come in. All that's gonna get thrown out. The jury is not going to hear that at all. They're not gonna watch that body cam.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
I want to
And it
talk
just
about I want to talk about something else right quick that happened Saturday, I think. There was a stabbing at a movie theater and a McDonald's. I don't know if you've heard about that
No,
in
I haven't.
Massachusetts. Let's talk about this right quick. Chad, are y'all good with talking about this? Are you? Heather says the case happened at the sub to the Titanic imploded and Trump was indicted and the FBI director Ray would be in question. The wife was shot in the hand trying to protect her sons. Gosh, just terrible.
Right now, the suspect wanted in a violent stabbing spree at a movie theater and restaurant is in custody and being identified by police. Thank you for joining us. I'm Tammy Matassa. We're now hearing from a mom who says 3 of her daughters and their friend were stabbed. Investigators believe this was a random attack. WBZ's Laura Havely spoke to the mom. She joins us live. Laura, how are they all doing tonight?
Well, there are still a lot of unanswered questions. Of course, the family members of the victims incredibly upset tonight. The Braintree AMC Theater behind me back open after those attacks last night, leaving 4 girls in the hospital, all 4 of those girls minors. There are a lot of unanswered questions, like I said, about the suspect's background, about the motive. The Plymouth County DA did release the identification of the suspect involved. Their name is Jared Ravizza. You'll see photos and images of that person here on a stretcher. It's the long blonde hair. That is the suspect, again, accused of the stabbing in Braintree, but that's not all. WBZ's I-Team able to confirm that Ravizza earlier in the day was believed to be wanted for murder in Connecticut. The Connecticut State Police releasing a bolo describing Ravizza as armed and dangerous, again, believed to be wanted for murder. And then Ravizza traveling up to Braintree and then to Plymouth, where he is accused of stabbing 2 people at a McDonald's. Ravizza was ultimately arrested after police were able to track him down, pursue their vehicle, and at which point Ravizza crashed and was taken into custody. Now, you mentioned we spoke to the mother of 3 of the stabbing victims here in Braintree. She's incredibly distraught. She was able to walk us through what happened inside of the theater, Ravizza's dark demeanor, and she tells us she's frustrated with the way staff handled the attack.
They were the only 4 people in this movie theater. They had just sat down. They had just got their concessions. And I guess he came up behind them in the row. They were like in the second row, and he came up behind them. My oldest was leaned over to get something. He got her in the back, and then my other daughter in the top chest, and then my last daughter across her arm, laughing the whole time, and then got their friend and then ran off. And the 2 older girls chased them outside, and then they kind of realized what was going on. They said they went out, they told the people at AMC, AMC didn't believe them, didn't do anything actually, and they had to call the police themselves.
And we did reach out to AMC for comment. They did not immediately get back to us. Ravizza has been hit with several charges, including intent to murder and assault and battery with a deadly weapon. In Braintree, Laura Havely, WBZ News.
Right now, the suspect wanted in a violent...
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. That's all I can say is wow. I mean, going to the movies, I never thought at any point growing up, the movie theater it would be somewhere that wouldn't be safe to go,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I agree with you. But just, don't even have words. I mean, I kind of want to know. I have so many questions, like my first question would be, let's back up. You said that there was a murder, like who was that person? Or what happened, what happened there, to lead him, to go into a movie theater and, do such a heinous crime on innocent people, and I believe I heard her say that he was laughing,
Yeah.
as he's
Yeah.
doing it. And that's just, that's the lack of empathy, emotional control, all happening, all at the same time, and especially the lack of empathy. I mean, because no, no other right person in their mind would think that it's funny, or would even think of, I'm gonna go to the movie theater today and I'm gonna stab as many people as I can. I mean, like, that is just unfathomable to me.
Well, think of the guy in Colorado, the one um that shot up the movie theater on the night
Mhm.
of the Batman movie premiering.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um, had his hair painted red or pink or something. Supposedly thought he was the Joker or something, and just went in and started shooting people. I mean, it's like at one particular point, it's I would even say it's more dangerous now than it was growing up. I just think before we had to hear probably about it a week or two later, maybe 3 weeks later, before we heard or read in the newspaper, remember, this person died because of this happened, this happened. And by that time, we're just like, oh, no big deal. We're young, we don't live there, whatever. But now it's instantaneous, and we hear so much bad stuff. That are people doing it for notoriety? Are they
Mhm.
doing it for attention? Yes, Heather, I
Yeah.
do remember that. Do you remember that, Carla, where she said, remember back when Scream came out and someone put a ghost face mask on and started stabbing people?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I remember that, and I do agree with you. I think it is for notoriety, and I believe there was some talks when I was in one of my classes, when all this started kind of kicking off, where they started advising the news media, because in the beginning of all of this, they were giving a lot of press to the person who did it. And a lot of pictures were shown it. And if you start to kind of see how the media even changed that, they may mention the name, but then they're talking more about the victims and more about the victims, and not giving that notoriety, because when they were, it seemed like the crimes were going up and up, because more and more people were doing it because they wanted, that fame, that those 15 minutes of fame, that people say. So I know even the news media started backing off from, talking too much about them, other than, it started talking more, focusing more on the victims. So
Right.
I know there was a change there, but still, it doesn't stop people. But I think, yeah, I think you're right, where it's for, the notoriety. It's for, it's kind of like, with this particular one, it kind of makes me think, like, if he's already murdered someone, or there's a question about him already doing an act, doing this next three isn't going to phase him. Maybe what he did prior to is heinous enough that, he knows what his fate is going to be. So,
Right. So I
I mean,
might as
there's
well
nothing to
take out as
lose.
many people. Yeah, I might as well take out as many people as possible. I'm already going to face this. Yeah, very, very good insight there. It's sad that this is the state of the world in which we live. True crime, obviously, a lot of people enjoy it. They enjoy, understanding it. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we also have to be vigilant in our own recourse while we're out in public, and not take for granted that the creepy person always looks creepy. We we have
Mhm.
to be mindful of the vehicles that we park next to. Before it used to be just a child abductor van, but now it could be an Amazon looking van or something like that. You got to be mindful. There's so many cases where people have been abducted from their own vehicle. They've been getting in their own vehicle. Somebody's either held them at gunpoint or abducted them, taken them, murdered them, done whatever. And, you have to be mindful. Is there anybody following me around the store? You have to not use the distraction of your phone while you're going around the store grocery shopping or, clothes shopping or just going in to get something. Be mindful of your surroundings. You got to take that time to be in the present because you could not only help somebody, but you could help yourself by making sure that you're not being followed, that somebody is not walking around with you, because I do it all the time. Sometimes I'm oblivious to my surroundings, and I'm a male. I'm a male. I'm a pretty good sized guy, but stuff happened to everybody, so nobody's invincible from it. And Heather said the stuff I warn my kids about. They probably acting think I'm nuts, but the older they get, the more they realize how crazy the world can be. Yeah, and I want to push that narrative right now. The boogeyman does not always look like the creepiest person in the room. If you look at some of these serial killers, some of the people that are like that individual we saw in that body cam, if you saw him in Walmart or you saw him in Target or at the grocery store, and he would have just done what he did, would you think he did what he did? He looked average Joe. But we're so fixated on what the individual looks like, there's no way he could be a killer because he looks too clean cut or he doesn't have that menacing look or whatever. The Delphi killer. Um, I don't know if it's Richard Allen or not, but the guy on the bridge looked kind of creepy, but he still wouldn't have looked like a serial killer. He looked like somebody that was out walking across the bridge, bundled up because it was cold. You know, I can't express that enough to the true crime community. The boogeyman does not always resemble the boogeyman because there's some creators on here that look like the boogeyman more than most boogeymen that I've seen in real life. So you got to be mindful. You got to be mindful of breaking the stereotypes. Look at the women that have killed their kids. They should tell everyone looks matter none. It's what inside is not seen in the real thing to fear. Exactly. That guy you were just talking about, Chris Watts, right? He looked
Mm-hmm.
like an average American dad. The wife. I get him and
Yes.
Peter. I get him and Peterson mixed up. What was her name? Lacey Peterson.
Scott Peterson. Yeah.
Yes, I get those two cases mixed up because they're clean cut people in those cases, right? Like
Right.
Chris Watt was the one that took the little girls and put them in the oil containers, right? And buried the wife not far from there. That's Chris Watts, right?
Yes, that's Chris Watts
Okay,
and
Lacey
his.
Peterson
Hmm.
was the pregnant one, right?
Hmm. Yeah, so Lacey
Okay.
Peterson, yeah, that was such an interesting story. Scott Peterson right now, and and he's on death row. He did get it's in California, so at the time that of his conviction, he did get death row. But then the death row was overturned because now California is not doing they're not actively, doing death row. So he got basically life without the possibility of parole. And I believe that now the victim, the Project Innocence, is picking up his case because they're saying, that there's a possibility that, that he did not kill his pregnant wife. But yeah, Scott Peterson, he's the one that they looked. He's handsome. His wife is
Yeah.
is beautiful, or what was beautiful. And they, it just, yeah, they, both of them, I think the reason why you may get them a little confused is because both of the wives, Marty, were pregnant. That's probably why,
Yeah.
Lacey was pregnant, and then so was Chris Watts' wife. She was also pregnant, and
Yeah, I didn't know she was pregnant.
yeah, she was pregnant, and I believe both women were expecting boys.
Oh wow.
Both women were expecting boys. Yeah, yeah, but this is such
So
as
so the Watts person,
Mhm.
that the one where they supposedly had a house that was broken into across the street at the time of the disappearance as well, right? Isn't that
that
when
that
supposedly
no
they were
no
trying to no?
that's Scott Peterson. That's why
Oh,
he's
okay.
getting, yeah, that's why they picked it up. So with Chris Watts, what happened with Chris Watts was that his wife, she was all over social media. She had really good friends. She went away on I believe like on a work trip, and one of her girlfriends, followed up with her. And she was always in communication, with her friends, and her friend knew that she had a doctor's appointment that following morning, and so was just kind of following up. And so when she saw that the wife was not responding back, she got very
Okay.
worried. And so what ended up happening was he went to work, right? And was pretending like nothing was going on. And so when she got there, she called the cops wanting to do a wellness check, and he hadn't had time to clean everything up. He didn't have the time to do any of that. So that friend, because that friend was vigilant into, hey, my friend, like kind of like what you're talking about, you got to be aware, so she was being very much aware, like this is out of character from my friend, and went there. And he was very, if you watch the footage of this guy, when the police and his next door neighbor, his camera happened to be pointed, and you could see that morning him leaving. But
Uh-huh.
you saw her arriving, but you never saw her leaving. You just saw him leaving early in the morning. And that was it. But his facial, I mean, expressions just changed. So
Yeah.
that's that one. But
Yeah, I get those two confused. I mean,
yeah.
I was very interested in the Chris Watts one when it first was going on. I remember following it, and I thought that was just terrible how those little girls were found in those oil tankers, and how the wife was buried not far away with the baby blanket or whatever, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of cases that you just wonder, man, how did this happen? Are you following the Sebastian Rogers case at all? The
No.
autistic boy? No. How about I'm going to ask you point blank, and you can tell me that you don't have a decision or anything like that. But do you have an opinion on the Idaho 4? Do you believe that Mr. Koberger is guilty or not guilty, or do you not have enough information at this point?
I just feel like man, wow. I just feel like I just don't have enough, I just don't have enough, information. And yeah, it's a tough one.
I mean, because at the beginning, I've shared with my audience, how I flip flop back and forth. Because in the beginning, I was probably like everybody else. Oh, they got an arrest. He's guilty. Trace evidence or trace DNA on the knife sheaths. Got him on camera. I thought the camera showed him 12 times around the residence. I was naive to it until I read the PCA, but I thought, they got him 12 times around the residence on camera. Boy, he's cooked. They got him.
Mhm.
But as I really started investigating it more based on some of the understanding about the the tire marks and all that stuff, it has really opened my mind to how a crime scene is really investigated rather than just just looking at the circumstantial evidence that you don't have when a case is just presented to you in public forum. In
Mhm.
public forum, you can easily say, well, that person's guilty because of this and that and the other, but you don't know behind the scenes what kind of evidence tracking that they do have. What have they done behind the scenes that they have not told anybody about. And I think it'll be interesting once we get to the trial that we actually get to see everything that was done and they actually get to show us, if they do, how they got to him. How they got to him, whether he was the one, and whether he's found guilty or not guilty. I mean, if I was on the jury today at this point,
Mhm.
I couldn't find him guilty or not guilty. I would be undecided. I might have to vote for a mistrial because I can't I can't see it either way. I mean, I can present the evidence, I can put stuff on there, and I can show you how it could have happened, or I
Mhm.
can show you how it could have not happened. But I don't see it for myself one way or the other. I'm stuck on some variables.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting case, but also I'm sure it's going to change a lot of laws. It's going to change some public opinion laws around the country once it's all said and done. I think this is going to be a monumental case where some laws are going to be changed because of the way procedure has been done.
Mhm.
Would you agree or disagree on that?
Oh no, I totally agree. I totally agree. There's just a lot there, and I think, once we get I'm like you, once we get to the court and once we start hearing everything, once we start seeing everything, after that, I think some things may change for sure.
Mhm. Heather says, I think sometimes people forget to think about if you were accused or your loved one, would all that's been said thus far be enough? I
It's a
don't
good
know.
point.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, that interesting part because you don't know how clear camera footage they have, whether it's grainy, whether you can really see stuff, or if they've been able to amplify it to show them exactly what they need to see. Um, in those 12 trips, what did they get from that information? I mean, did they get any other evidence that they have lied about not getting? I mean, because I was telling the chat yesterday, I think, that I was reading a chapter in my criminal justice book where it was talking about investigations and
Mhm.
then interviews and interrogations, and it put a part in there where it said law enforcement lies,
Yeah.
and I was dumbfounded when I read that. I was like, did I read this right? I had to go back and
Mhm.
read it again, and it said that law enforcement lies. That is a tactic. Lying is allowed by law enforcement. So whenever people hear certain things and then it's redacted, there's a reason for that. It's like, I don't want to show you or tell you exactly what I know. I'm going to lie or
Mhm.
maybe embellish the truth a little bit. And then later on, when we're certain, then I'm going to go back and tell you the real thing. So I think that has caused there's a lot of confusion in a lot of cases, because of the inconsistency of the stories that are told, you know.
Yeah.
And you're right, Heather. There are some cases where DNA has exonerated innocent people. I sent Swamp Rose an article, and I'm sure y'all have heard about it even before I sent it to her. Um, about a paramedic that was working on a guy that was injured, got his DNA on his scrubs or whatever, and and went to another crime scene or something of a murder, and the DNA that he got off the injured individual got placed on the murder DNA somehow, and the guy that was injured got put on death row for the murder. And it wasn't until later on that he was exonerated. So if that can happen, think of how easy it is for other things to happen. Is that not wild, Karla? If you were in a wreck and a paramedic was saving your life, then he went to a murder scene, took your DNA, and your DNA ended up at the murder scene. Somehow your DNA was extracted as a possible suspect, and they found enough of it to put you at the scene, and they arrested you for murder, even though you were just in the hospital for 2 days fighting for your life. But you
Crazy.
couldn't really prove it at that point.
Yeah, crazy. And that's just what's scary, when it comes to our DNA and everything with all of that, because, think about it, we leave our DNA everywhere, everywhere. You throw away, you're sipping on your, drink or Starbucks drink or whatever after you're done with it, you throw it away. That's your DNA that just went in there, all that. I mean, it's so, you know, um, it's scary, it's just scary. And sometimes that's why you can't really, you got to look at the big picture, you got to have evidence. We can't just rely, on one thing. And, when these detectives and everything are trying to investigate, they're trying to investigate these crimes as quickly as possible, because just as soon as they sit down to write the report, another crime has happened, I mean, and they are running around, and their main goal is to hurry up and close this case as quickly as possible. So, if my DNA is more prevalent down there, I mean, they're if I'm the hit, then I'm the hit, I mean, and that is sad. I mean, even there's there's a podcast, and I know the victim's name is Hay, and it was a podcast that actually, because they did a lot of investigation on this particular case, that actually exonerated the the victim, and he was in life, he received life without the possibility of parole, and because of the
Mm-hmm.
podcast, he is now out. My gosh, I cannot remember. And I listened to that entire podcast, and
Yeah.
gosh, I cannot remember the name. The name is just not. It's just not getting me right now. And so, that's kind of why it's so important, I think, for us to have open minds, and for us to open our minds up to channels like this, because you just never know. You just
Right.
never know. And yeah, I cannot remember the name of that
I mean,
case, but a podcaster.
facts and knowledge are powerful.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
what you don't know can somehow come back to bite you someday. And it's not what you know; it's what you can prove. Always remember
exactly.
that it's not what you know or what you think; it's what you can prove.
It's
So
what you
if you
can prove.
can't prove it, if you can't prove it, then it's just hearsay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, think about all the I mean, for me, I mean, I'm single, and so if somebody were, "What did you do last night?" "Well, I slept." "Really?"
Yeah.
You know? "Can you prove that?" "I was sleeping. How can I prove when I was sleeping? I was home," I mean, it's
Right.
hard.
Right.
It's hard to prove some of that stuff,
Especially if your phone falls asleep, or you turned it
Mhm.
off. You don't have any kind of really any way to verify that. But I wanted to
Yeah.
say, 20% of dollar bills, fives and 20s have cocaine residue on them. Do you know why that is?
Oh, yeah. I know.
You
I know
do?
exactly why. Oh, yeah, because people, they use it. They roll it up, and it stays in the fibers of the dollar bills, and then,
Yeah.
they usually roll it up to, to snort the cocaine, and it stays, because I mean the dollar bill isn't made of just paper. I mean there's
Right.
a lot that goes into making the dollar bills. I mean that's why, you can actually, wash them, and the ink isn't gonna run. It's not like it's paper. So yeah, it's got
Right.
fibers in it, and it stays stuck in the fibers.
And the other 20% has butt crack juice based to the think to the strippers.
Yeah. Yeah, because they put them in there, it's, oh yeah, or people don't wash their hands. I mean, people just do not
Yeah,
wash
yeah,
their hands. When I was going through chemotherapy, that was one of the things that, if for me anyways, I could not go out into public. I
yeah.
couldn't let people touch me or shake anyone's hands, because so many people just don't wash their hands. I can't eat.
Yeah.
Like I was forbidden to eat anything out. Like and to me, I was like, what? Because people don't wash their hands.
Exactly.
And so,
Exactly.
yeah, going through chemo, we did not, there was no way, I could suffer from anything, any exposure to anything. But a lot of it is just because people just plainly don't wash their hands. So if there's, you know, that kind of stuff on dollar bills, that, I mean, I'm sorry to say, but we're eating some of it too. Because when we
Yeah,
go to
exactly.
restaurants, hey, and one of the things that my dietitian told me, Marty, that was kind of, I was like, oh my gosh, and I'm gonna follow this probably forever. She said, don't eat anything that's cold. Because if it's cold and the person didn't wash their hands, like salads, fruits, out in public, and they're touching that, there's, if it's a hot food, the
Yeah, it's
heat
at least gonna. Yeah,
it's gonna burn off, and it's, but yes, even now I'm like, I don't know if I should eat a salad.
yeah.
I'm like, oh.
That's why I don't like to eat Chinese food that's cold. 'Cause I don't trust it. You know what I mean? There's so much stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I started a conversation in the chat.
yeah.
Mikey says it's even bigger, bro. I heard 90% plus. Someone said, "Ew, I'm from Canada, so don't look at me." 90% butt juice. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Them strippers work hard for them dollars.
Yeah,
Come
they
out your
do.
pocket. Come out your pocket.
Yeah, they
Anyways,
they definitely do.
gotta get back on topic. um, you know,
Yeah, talking about butt juice. Talking about that, one of my dearest friends, her friend, we feel like he's a narcissist, right? And because she tells me stuff. He went to a strip club and dropped $3,000.
oh my god.
So think about that, $3,000, and he wanted it all in fives and tens. So, just think about that. That's how much he dropped, but he's starving for that attention. But yeah, yeah. So I was just
Oh
like, oh
yeah,
my
you feel
gosh.
like a big baller when you walk in there and you say, "Give me $100 in one." Boy, then you go in there with a big old stack like that.
Yeah, yeah. And
I can
but
imagine what he felt like was what'd you say?
3,000.
10 to 3,000.
Three
And
thousand
what?
dollars. That's how much he spent at the club. I mean, and he's he can't keep a relationship, so but he is. So I know for sure there's $3,000 out there in fives and ones that have
My
some butt
God.
juice on them.
That's why I never carry cash. That's why I never carry cash. Everything's on card for me. If I can help it, I don't get cash if I can help it. And it's not because of that, but where has this dirty ass dollar bill been?
Yeah, right. Where did it come from?
You put your initials on it, it makes its way back to you 30 years later. Like, what the hell?
Oof.
Well, anyways, thank you guys so much in the chat for showing back up and giving Karla and myself your knowledge and your understanding and your feedback. It's always appreciated. Continue to come back. I'll probably invite Karla up again for, commentary and stuff of that nature. She's very knowledgeable. And I guess we've gone 2 hours and 36 minutes, so I guess I'm gonna cut it loose and let the live go for now. But like I said, thank all of y'all. Thank you for your feedback, and please continue to like the channel if you do. Give some comments. If you're on replay and you watch this, don't hold the butt juice. Comment against me. It was just a moment of insanity there. We all have it. But y'all have a good night, and thank you so much. And I'm gonna cue the music.